everybody wants to succeed, everybody wants to win. But you see, over the last couple of years in my journey, I've understood that failure is a part of the process. Failure is the path to greatness. Failure is the path to a massive success. Because without failing, you cannot win. Hey, welcome to another episode of the Wealth and Business Podcast. In this episode, I wanted to do a solo one because I wanted to talk about things a lot of entrepreneurs don't talk about, and a lot of things that business people who've probably made it to the top sometimes don't talk about, because everyone talk about the successful side of their businesses, but nobody actually talk about when things are not actually going right, or when you're going through overwhelm, you're going through depression, you're going through anxiety. And this is the life and story of entrepreneur. And why did I decide to do this episode? I decided to do this episode because whether you are already an established business, or whether you are a business getting started, or you are a professional transitioning from your professional or corporate career into entrepreneurship, these are things that you are going to experience whether you like it or not. Number one, there are days you're going to wake up and you don't want to get out of bed. That's number one. Number two, there are days where you're going to be stressed, not actually days, weeks, where you are going to be stressed, not knowing what to do. Number three is basically you are going to consistently feel that you are failing. You're going to consistently feel that you are failing in your business. And number five, you are as well as going to have days where you are completely lost of ideas. Now, what gives me the audacity to share this? I've been there, I've done that, I'm doing it, and I've been through all these different types of situation in my life, in my business over the last 23 years. Part of the reason why I wrote the book, The Test. I wrote The Test because I wanted to share a story of my transitioning into an extraordinary entrepreneur. And part of the things that I share in the book of The Test were just challenges after challenges after challenges I had to overcome as a successful entrepreneur. Let's go in deeper and talk about one very first step. As I mentioned, in no particular order of the 5 things I wanted to talk about in this episode was number one is failure. Now, when I was getting started in my property business, I consistently felt the act of failing. I consistently felt it in my body, in my bones, in my actions, that I wasn't going to win, that I was going to fail. Now, why did I feel I was going to fail? I felt I was going to fail because I never thought at any point in time that I could raise money to expand my business, or I could generate enough sales to even keep cash coming into the business. And for this simple reason, I felt I was not going to do it anyway. I felt like, at some point, I felt like, just maybe continue to drive as an Uber driver was a great idea. Because at that time, I already failed anyway. In 2015, I already failed and I already lost my business. And I kept having that failure play in my mindset, having failed in the previous year, 2015, where I lost over 150,000 pounds in my business. And that failure kept haunting me. But one of the things that I did to overcome that consistent mindset that came to stare at me and look at me in the face that I was failing is to stay inspired. Number two was to stay motivated. Number three was to understand that it is okay to fail. You see, I recently read an article in the US. And when I read this article, it spoke about one thing that was very, very key. In the United States of America, business people, entrepreneurs only do business with people who have experienced failures before. You see, you cannot have a business that is going to win or be successful and is going to make an impact without you understanding failure. And the truth is that most coaches out there, most business entrepreneurs out there, most very successful mentors out there don't actually teach you how to fail, because everybody wants to succeed, everybody wants to win. But you see, over the last couple of years in my journey, I've understood that failure is a part of the process. failure is the path to greatness. Failure is the path to a massive success, because without failing, you cannot win. Imagine, for example, you've came across, maybe you went to play lottery and you won £1,000,000. If you've never handled £1,000,000 before, if people around you has never ever handled £1,000,000 before, the very first thing that's going to come into your mindset is, how do you go to the next fancy restaurant? How do you buy the first Rolex? How do you buy that first lovely looking car? How do you buy that first houses? And these are the things a lot of people do, which then make them to, for example, lose £1,000,000 that they just won from lottery. And this is one of the reasons why statistics have shown to us that a very high number of individuals who come across, winning lottery, they always go back being very even poorer than they've ever been, because they didn't understand how to manage that money. So in America, when I read this particular article, it spoke about the fact that to become a successful entrepreneur, you have to fail. And don't be ashamed when you fail to actually share the lessons learned, to actually share what you learned, to actually look in that particular situation and analyze, what did you do to overcome? What did you do to reposition yourself? For me, I failed so many times. Once upon a time where I actually failed was 2004, when I first came into the UK. Now, there's a lot of failure in this. There's also a lot of winning in this. So at some point in my life, I bowed to pressure. I was a sales guy. And because I bowed to pressure as a sales guy way back in university, I became a member of a gang. And for me, I thought I was a failure because I should have never bowed to the pressure in university of becoming a member of a gang. At the end of the day, what did I learn from it? I learned that I could have been killed. I learned that I could have been destroyed completely. I learned that if I continued in this sort of environment, I could have completely been wiped out this planet at the moment. Now, I relocated to the United Kingdom and then did all sort of linear job upon my arrival, because the kind of lifestyle I had in Nigeria when I first came here wasn't the lifestyle I was expecting. But I bowed to pressure and I did what I needed to do in the UK, and I became a cleaner. I became the guy who was the perfume sprayer in the toilet, on the nightclubs, and I did all different types of linear jobs. So I learned the spirit of resilience through failures. And this is one of the things about life. Elon Musk is another example. Elon Musk had built a successful business, and then he decided to launch SpaceX. And by the time he was launching SpaceX, he had $180 million available for him to invest in Tesla and as well as invest in SpaceX. And he split those money into two, and he started to grow the business SpaceX and launched 3 rockets. He had enough money to launch 3 rockets to the sky, to space, and then obviously get NASA involved, and the business becomes investable. But he kept pushing, even though every single rocket that he shot to the sky never got to the space. The rockets never got to where they needed to get to. So at the end of the day, guys, failure is when you learn from the worst case scenario and you check, what can you do better? How can you become the greatest version of yourself? And how can that failure serve others so that others can learn to be the greatest version of themselves? Now, another part I wanted to obviously talk about is there are times where, for example, I had a property transaction that I couldn't fund, and I had to raise money overnight. I had to raise money within days, within weeks. And there were times where that is going on and I couldn't I wasn't even motivated to do anything, because at this point in time, I'm feeling like, okay, what's going on? Especially one situation in my very transaction about a year or two ago, I think about 2 years ago, I was actually buying this property and one of my investors pulled out last minute. And the reason why this investor pulled out from this particular transaction was because my wife was a director in that particular company, and as well as myself. And this particular investor says, oh, I don't want to go into business with you and then be in business with your wife. And then the investor ended up pulling out of that particular transaction because he said, I'll be in business with you and I'll be in business with your wife because your wife is also a director in that company. And to be honest, this transaction was meant to pull through in less than 7 to 10 days. And I was not put in a situation where I had to raise money overnight. But for the first 2 nights, of this particular investors pulling out from this transaction, I felt so demotivated that I didn't want to get out of bed. I felt like literally the whole world was literally crashing down on me. So when you are in business, there will be situations that would basically hold you back because something in your business is, or a structure in your business is something else that someone else doesn't align with. So for example, this particular investor wasn't aligned the fact that my wife was a director in one of my companies that was acquiring asset. And he said, I can't do business, unfortunately, at this point in time, because I had had a rethink, because I have had troubles in my life, in my business, where my wife was a director, and it gave me XYZ issues. So you are actually in a risk for putting your wife in your business as a director. So I don't want to be involved in a husband and wife crisis at a later stage. So for this simple reason, I'm pulling out because I have had this sort of issue. But for me, I just felt like he didn't understand what it means for me to have a single unit controlled by myself and my wife together as a party rather than as separated parties. Now, what did I do? I felt down. I felt like, oh, do I need to resign my wife as a director and stay alone in that particular company and then raise money for myself? Now, from time to time, as entrepreneurs, you will find yourself in similar situations or different sort of case scenario in your business that investors will pull out from a business transaction just because of how your company is structured. But that doesn't mean you have to pull out. That doesn't mean that business comes to an end. There's always going to be an investor on the other side that will always work with you. Cut long story short, within about 10 days, I was still able to find an investor who their purpose aligned with my purpose, and I was still able to get the business, in the right place. Now, another situation I want to talk about is stress. Now, as I spoke before, in no particular order, when I started this, I want to talk about stress. And I wanted to talk about sometimes the kind of stress that I go through in my business. And this is normal. Like, stress is part of the life of an entrepreneur. Not every single time everything is going to go straight forward or go straight through in your business. So I have not grown my entire organization to in excess of over 7 figures combined. Now, running a business that is 7 figures, doing multi-million pound turnover year in, year out. So for example, your business is doing over £1 million to 1.5 million turnover every single year. That's a lot of money. Once upon a time, I did not even think I can basically have business that will do over £1 million in the UK. So for example, in Nigeria, that is over 1 billion naira. An equivalent of $1 million is just, around about 900 with this current exchange rate, about 900 million. So if we're talking about 900 million naira and we're talking about £1 million, or let's just say 1.5 million, you're now talking about over 1 billion in naira. So at the end of the day, the stress level that you have to manage this kind of business is not the same stress level that you have in managing a business that is doing just about, say for example, £70,000 to £100,000. The stress levels are different. The kind of conversations you're having is different. So in business, you will go through different stress level according to the growth that you are having in your business. Some people get started in business, their goal is to have 10,000 turnover. Some people get started in business, their goal is to have a £50,000 turnover. There's some people start business and their goal is to have tens and tens and tens of millions of pounds or millions of naira, whatever you want to break that into. I'm referring to naira because these days a lot of our clients, a lot of our audiences as well are watching from Africa. So I wanted to kind of relate. So now, if you're trying to grow a business that is doing over £1 million turnover in a year, the level of your thoughts, the levels of your intention, the levels of how you get it all together becomes completely different. So you will be stressed. You will need to up your game. You would need to have a mindset shift. You would need to have the right people in your circle, in your community, in your network that are maybe doing more or probably about doing the same, so that you can grow from that perspective and have a business that can eventually pay yourself, pay your wife, look after your kids, pay for decent holidays, and so on and so forth. So the stress level is absolutely different. I haven't got a case study I want to share with you in this particular conversation on this particular episode, but in subsequent episodes to come, I will be speaking on just like fear. I will be speaking on the topic of depression. I will be speaking on a specific topic and just staying into it. So if you like this episode, make sure you like, comment, share this with your friend. Now, business is not always rosy. It's never rosy. And you will have days where things are not working, and it's okay. You have the days where things are super working, and it's okay. But there is nothing such as perfection, whether you're transitioning from the corporate industry into becoming an entrepreneur, or if you're an entrepreneur trying to start your business, or you're an entrepreneur who is at the growth stage of your business. For example, I am an entrepreneur who is in the scale phase of my business. So like they say, new levels, new devils. All right. And you will go through these things, and it's okay. Do not allow these things I've spoken about, all right, to hold you back, or rather understand it is part of the transitioning from the ordinary to the extraordinary. I'll see you on the next episode, guys. Take care.